Story 1. Well, I simply don't believe it. The reason I originally lost my faith was because I thought to myself, why is my religion correct while other religions are incorrect? And I couldn't come up with a convincing argument. Story 2. Lack of evidence. Even when I was a Christian kid, I didn't really believe. Other than going to church, listening to Christian music, and attending the occasional youth group, I never did anything religious. I never read my Bible or prayed outside of church. When I turned 18, my mom stopped making me go, and I didn't hesitate to stop going forever. Story 3. Nothing stopped me. When I was a kid, it was forced on me by people who had no interest in answering my logical questions. I didn't know the word at the time, but looking back, I saw religion as a cult. I was being indoctrinated, and I saw through it. I played along to keep adults off my back until I could say, without feeling threatened, this is nonsense and I don't have to play anymore. Story 4.1. Nothing about religion made my dysfunctional home life any better. Visiting Dominican priest, that's not the country. It's a religious order in Catholicism. Traumatized my mom by making a pass at her. Story 5. I wasn't raised around it, so it all just seems like nonsense fairy tales to me. Also, the older I get, the more it just looks like mental illness too. Story 6. Family was part of a Christian cult in the late 1980s and early 1990s. Widespread child sexual abuse mixed with extreme violence towards women, all in the name of God. Believing in God is one thing, organized religion is just plain stupid. Story 7. Raised Catholic. Family is still Catholic. In 6th grade religion class at Catholic school, the nun told me my dog wouldn't go to heaven. I left right then. Done. Story 8. I grew up in a Catholic home, attended a Catholic school, and did all that jazz. None of the stories ever made sense to me when confronted with the realities of the world outside the doors of the church. I had a classmate who died of cancer at the age of 10. What possible reason could God have for that? What plan would be so cruel as to take a child from her parents, her friends, her very life? I can't recall ever believing in God, but that moment probably cemented my refusal to consider belief. Story 9. When I asked my atheist mom questions about God, as depicted by my school, she always answered, well, Christians believe. When I asked these same questions at my school, they answered with the certainty of knowledge. I think I preferred my mother's humility. She isn't one of those atheists. Story 10. Actually reading the holy book and realizing that it's just nonsense written by some old men thousands of years ago in the Middle East to control people. Story 11. When I was young, I was taught that God was all-powerful and all-good. One day in elementary school, I wondered why people are allowed to be mean to me. I was the kid everyone picked on, and concluded that God can't exist. I've been an atheist since I was 8. Story 12. I was raised Christian, but it just didn't work out. I found it hateful, abusive, and controlling. I have tried other faiths. I've tried other types of Christianity, and I've even tried non-Abrahamic religions. I still found the same issues. I'm very well aware it could be a people issue more than a faith issue, but I figure it's a lot easier to just not participate. Story 13. Being raised in a super religious church showed me a lot of crazy religious people. As I got older, I thought about the stories in the Bible, and they just didn't make any sense. I then soon realized that it was likely made up and not worth investing my time in. Story 14. I have always been a bit slow on the uptake with some things, so it took me until sophomore year in prep school to realize it was all nonsense. There was a Jesuit deacon teaching a course called Finding a Faith of Your Own, which was designed to give us teenagers the illusion of agency by demystifying parts of the Bible. He was in the middle of explaining how numbers were used symbolically in the Old Testament, and how any given number could mean as long as it took. 40 days and 40 nights? As long as it took, etc. Trying to wrap my head around this new information, I asked about when Jesus multiplied the loaves and fishes and was nervously interrupted with, "No, that's the New Testament. Everything in the New Testament is literally true. We are talking about the Old Testament and how symbolism applies to that book. We don't ever question the word of Jesus." Right then, I saw through the deception. The veil had been lifted by logic and critical thinking. Story 15. I'm culturally Lutheran but spiritually indifferent. I think the big draw of religion was community and a safety net for previous generations. The churches really bungled the safety net aspect, which is why they're dying, and atheism is widely accepted. Story 16. Agnostic but with many reasons revolving around basic logic. My major turning point was a chronic illness at 15 that nearly killed me, and in general, just seeing other people suffer for no reason. If God is out there, He's indifferent to our existence, so why bother worshiping Him? Story 17. Raised on scientific materialism and skeptical inquiry. Later, it became obvious that there was a continuity between stories meant to be fiction and those meant to be unassailable truth. And it seemed obvious that the stories in the canon of religion were not consistently better and were often evidently part of a pre-existing literary tradition. Obvious fabrications are not convincing. Story 18. Objectively reading the Bible and then studying how Christianity became the predominant religion of the West made me realize that religions are about conformity and control and have absolutely nothing to do with morality and truth. Story 19. I learned how the sausage was made. At some point, critical thinking and religion will meet if you are academically honest enough, and then a decision needs to be made. Story 20. This question feels so weird to me. Maybe it's because I'm not a native English speaker, but it feels like it implies that being religious would be the logical, deterministic conclusion of one's spirituality, except for some people where something made them become atheists. It feels this way to me because nothing stopped me. I was never religious, nor was I ever really interested in becoming religious. I grew up in a secular environment and family, got curious about faith and religions, notably for their role in our society and history, but that's the extent of it. I'm glad for people who find comfort in religion. I'm appalled at how some others use it to justify terrible things they do, but there's no activism in my atheism. Story 21. Elementary school science taught me that there was no magical man in the sky or some heaven beyond the clouds. There was no hell beneath our feet. Double rainbows aren't a sign that the earth won't flood again, and babies aren't miracles but are grown inside a female womb. Story 22. I believed in God the same way I believed in Santa, Tooth Fairy, and Easter Bunny. When I realized that the last three are not real, it made me stop believing in what I can't see, touch, or smell. It's been 20 years, and I haven't seen one piece of evidence. Story 23. Born and raised in a Catholic country. Priests asked me, a 10-year-old, to be kind to others and then proceeded to be rude, if not worse, to others. Priests delivered sermons about including and welcoming everyone, yet in the same sermon said that if you do not go to church every Sunday, you do not deserve to be invited to your daughter's wedding. Priests who are obsessed and shocked by teenagers kissing in public yet have a secret affair with the choir director and even a child with her. Basically, priests in general. And common sense. Story 24. I'm not an atheist, but I am very strongly agnostic for the simple fact that religion doesn't make sense internally, and it provides zero evidence of its veracity, and even worse, makes believing without proof a tenet of itself. Science does not say, this truth is immutable. It says, this is what we know right now, but we are always trying to find out more. Some of what we now think is true will be proven wrong, and that's great because we will get that much closer to the truth. Religion says truth is immutable. God made it all. You can't question it because that would be sacrilege. It would too. Questioning the sanctity of religion is against the sanctity of religion because religion is sanctified. In other words, someone once said it was holy, so it's holy. Don't ask questions. The problem is, nothing that religion purports to be true is provable in any way, and this has been true since religion was invented. Religion requires faith. What is faith? Believing something without any basis in fact. It's a closed loop. That said, I have never seen any proof that the spirit or soul does not exist, so I reject atheism for the same reason I reject religion. Neither extreme is provable. Neither extreme is provable based on observable evidence, and in the end, both extremes require a leap of faith to embrace. That's why agnosticism works for me. I'll leave the door open to the possibilities, but I'm not jumping down any rabbit holes for either atheism or religion. Story 25. I quit Christianity because I was told I would go to hell for acting on my attraction to women. I stopped believing in God at all after I miscarried wanted twins. I was and still am a good person who cares more about others than myself. It was either hate God or stop believing, and I didn't want to spend my life in a perpetual bad mood. Story 26. Nothing. I just never had any faith or belief in the supernatural. This includes religion, ghosts, spirits, tarot, horoscope, crystals, karma, cryptids, and so on. I was raised in a Christian family and studied in a nunnery. The nuns were always very respectful to me. I didn't have any particular bad experience with religion, and for all intents and purposes, I was raised in an environment that should promote someone religious. There are leftovers of it in me. I say Lord, God, and religious expressions a lot like God bless, and so on. I also like studying religions and reading about them. Someone of faith once told me that I may be an atheist, but I'm religious, so take what you will from that. But I do not believe in any higher power, and I realized that very early, like when I was 7 or 8. I see no evidence for believing in it, but I respect other people's faiths. Story 27. Lack of evidence. Even growing in a Catholic environment and going to a Catholic school, the evidence just wasn't there, and up to today I couldn't find it. So I concluded that there is no God out there. Story 28. Odd answer. Antipsychotic medication showed me that my delusions are either 1, a product of my own mind, or 2, that the spirit world is so insignificant that it can be silenced by human medicine and is no longer worthy of my attention or worship. To this day, I'm the only person to arrive at atheism due to lived experience. Yes, don't get me wrong, I spent time since then sharpening my critical thinking skills and generally embracing skepticism. Story 29. Realizing it is just a form of control. Keeps people in order. For example, Methodism stops people from drinking. No hangover, and they will be hard at work on Mondays. Nothing against religious people. Good for you. I just don't get it. Story 30. A better question is what makes anyone religious in the first place? You may ask someone, why do you smoke? Or, why did you stop smoking? But not what stopped you from smoking, like it's something you expect everyone to do. Story 31. One of my friends who was Christian walked up to our other friend who was Muslim and said, if you're right, I go to hell and eventually get to go to heaven. If I'm right, you go to hell for all eternity. The amount of self-satisfaction she seemed to have while saying it was the last nail in the coffin for me with religion and our friendship. Also, I read a book called Sins of the Scripture that showed historical and factual issues with the idea that Christianity is the one true religion. It's really just a remix of older religions that came before it. Story 32. When I was pretty young, religion wasn't even something I knew existed. I remember being at a grocery store and seeing those small machines where you'd put coins in to get a chance at an item it displayed. I saw a necklace I thought was cool and asked my dad for a quarter to try to get it. I remember him saying no, and when I asked why, he said, because Jesus says that's inappropriate. Obviously confused, at about 8 or 9, I was thinking, who's Jesus? And what does inappropriate mean? And why does my dad look so upset? He was in and out of my life for a bit. Then, in South Carolina, he made me go to a church with him and his new girlfriend. My parents divorced a few months after I was born. The entire time, I didn't care about what the preacher was saying, and I didn't like that I had to hide who I was. I had to change how I talked, dressed, and acted, all because of some figure in a book. What really directed me towards atheism was my supposed rebirth or being born again. Something like that. I didn't do the baptism because, from what I heard, you get dumped in a pool behind the stage and the water is freezing. On the day of this rebirth, we sat in the front row, and for about 5 to 10 minutes, this grown man shouted in my ear about Jesus and belief. I was just saying, yeah, all apathetically, as my ears started to deafen from all the shouting like it was a microphone. When I stood up, the whole church had formed a circle, and everyone shook my hand and congratulated me. It felt so strange, almost cult-like, and I felt like there was going to be some spiked drink or something. I'd always get kind of annoyed when someone would say they felt a spirit or something pass over them. But lately, I've just been annoyed at how religion is used in politics. It's always, my God says this is wrong, and that's all they need. Even when I was a kid, I liked the same sex, and I couldn't talk to anyone about it because I was terrified of what would happen to me. Story 33. Parents both worked in emergency services. My dad was a county coroner at one point. They have seen some real bad situations. I went to church as a kid, but it was always my choice. My dad flat out said one day that he has seen too many people hurt by other people and killed or someone dying from an accident. The one thing that sticks with him is that most people in shock and dying will call out for their mother or family, not God. I realize this is a very morbid take, but I just had a life-threatening car wreck last year, and I can tell you right now there is nothing after. I was experiencing internal bleeding and in shock and almost declared dead on arrival at the emergency room. I wasn't even scared, honestly. I knew I was hurt as soon as the wreck happened, and I had to kick my door open to get out. The first thing I did was call my mom and told her I loved her and I was hurt really badly. I didn't even call the emergency services. I was just glad I got to talk to my parents on the phone before I blacked out. I think the driver of the car that hit me was actually having a full-on panic attack, and I was just sitting in a ditch chatting with my parents. I had my descending colon, gallbladder, appendix, and 2.2 feet of my small intestine removed. I lost 15 pounds in a week, and within a month, I went from 205 pounds down to under 170 pounds. Today, I've never felt better in my whole life. I'm active and running, working on my cardio. I know God didn't save me. The trauma team and surgeon at the hospital saved me. They told me I could wake up with a colostomy bag or worse, and I stood up out of bed and walked the whole unit one day after surgery. I didn't even let them fill the prescription for pain medication when I was discharged. I just wanted to go home, eat real food, and play Xbox. I've also started reading again quite a bit and have really figured out who I am. I'm confident and motivated to make my life better and help other people in this crazy, messed up world. Terrible grammar on this rant, but this question really hits home for me.